Good morning. It's Viewpoint, I think, or the name of this program is Why Don't Doctors Make House Calls? As you see, we're working under duress. This is Andy Devine speaking from WLCN. To my right is the daughter of our co-host. Mrs. Busby is enjoying a few days down south with some friends, and her daughter Cynthia Bowns is once again graciously kicking in. We appreciate your visit with us, Sis, and I'm going to let you carry most of the load today. You might notice that I have somewhat of a problem. Kudos. We're going to start with kudos here this morning. First one, I noted that a young man by the name of Mark Gordon has been honored by Blackhawk College for his successes after he's left the college. And the neat part about that is, and the part I really want to make a kudo is that Mark realizes that Blackhawk was an integral part of his success that he's enjoying, and he's seen fit to return some of his largesse to the college in the form of endowed scholarship. So that's a great thing, Mark, and we salute you for that. And now an old-timer wants to talk about an institution in Lincoln that was a very viable thing when he was a kid, and that was just before Billy Herndon was with Abraham Lincoln. But the Maple Club, it was a great place out there in the days, my salad days, and it was a wonderful entertainment venue. And we give a kudo to Kim Foreman. She's trying very hard to revitalize the Maple Club, and to the point where she's bringing back entertainment on a regular basis. We wish her well on that. It's nice to have that venue viable again in the community. We all have different likes and dislikes and different ways of entertaining ourselves, and this is a great venue. And I'm going to ask Cynthia in to talk about this weekend a little bit. Go ahead, Cinth.
Yeah, this Saturday they're going to have Jazz It Up. It's with the Johnny Owens Band, and the doors will open at 6:30. Dinner's at 7, and jazz will be from 7:30 to 10 o'clock. They'll be serving a garden salad, roast beef, potatoes, seasoned vegetables, and have a dessert bar. And it's $20 a person, and you can get tickets at Vintage Fair or at the Maple Club Business Office at 120 South McLean.
Yeah, that'll be a fun evening, folks. I've heard this Johnny Owens outfit, and they're good. And again, it's nice to have a different option for entertainment. And the Maple Club is a great old place. Had one of the best dance floors in Central Illinois. Still has that wonderful band shell up there for the musicians. And so I commend that for a nice place to go. This Saturday, February the 9th, doors are going to open up at 6:30. So entertain yourselves, folks. Now, we're waiting arrival of one of our guests who GPS failed, and I think she's in Chatsworth, Illinois, instead of Atlanta. But we'll bring her on when we can. In the meantime, we're very pleased to have with us an old friend and a Logan County boy who's come back to his county and making a really notable contribution to Vinegar Hill area and its environs. Phil and Ginny Bertoni have been involved in Mount Pulaski since they came back. They've been making their contributions. He gets really interested in things, and is very, very helpful. He's a great PR for Vinegar Hill. Welcome, Phil Bertoni. We're glad to have you back with us, sir.
Hi, Bill and Cynthia. Glad to be here again.
We've got something coming up here in Mount Pulaski. It's pretty important, and we're going to have a gentleman who's going to be there call in very shortly from wherever he is. So tell us about this gentleman who's represents Billy Herndon, the Abraham Lincoln's law partner.
Well, we have what I'm referring to as a modern-day Hal Holbrook, who, as a young man, traveled with his wife, I think it was Daisy, all over the United States in plays and portraying this and that. And finally, he settled on Mark Twain, but he also did Abraham Lincoln and a host of other things, as we all know, on TV, radio, movies, and so forth. But this young man Brian Fox Ellis lives in Peoria, works out of Peoria, but he will be going from Mount Pulaski this weekend after he does 2 days of reenactments here in Mount Pulaski. He's on his way to Denver to portray Charles Darwin. So his repertoire is quite lengthy. It's page after page that I've noticed on his website that he portrays. And for us, we've asked him to portray a sort of a triple hitter. He's going to do for the grade school kids on Friday morning at Mount Pulaski Grade School. And for the Zion Lutheran students, just a couple blocks away, they're going to come over to the gymnasium there. He's going to portray a boyhood friend of Abraham Lincoln. And if my memory serves me correctly, in Kentucky, little Abe was drowning, I believe it was, and his boyhood friend saved him. And of course, there's another story. He got kicked in the head and all this, but I think it's the time where he was drowning and this. So then this boyhood friend ends up moving to Illinois and ends up in New Salem. So anyway, it's quite a story. That's all I know about it. And he's going to do that reenactment of this boyhood friend. Now, in the afternoon, we're going to take him down to high school, and he's going to portray Walt Whitman, the American poet who knew Abraham Lincoln, and Mr. Lincoln knew Walt Whitman and admired him as a poet at that time. And of course, his famous poem, one of his famous poems was "Oh Captain, My Captain," written as an eulogy. But you know, the proper word for that is elegy. I looked it up on the internet. It's a mournful, melancholic, plaintive poem, especially a funeral song or a lament for the dead. But even Brian refers to it as an eulogy because most people don't understand this other word, which I didn't know about either until I looked it up. But so he's going to do Walt Whitman for the high school kids. And then next day, Saturday morning at 11 o'clock, he's going to portray William Herndon, who was Abraham Lincoln's law partner, his third law partner, and his longest law partner. He kept in contact with his law partner, William Herndon, even from the White House. And so then there were a couple trials that we know about in the Mount Pulaski Courthouse that I think Brian is going to talk about and reenact perhaps a part of one of them that was in the Mount Pulaski Courthouse. And William Herndon was part of that research team that Mr. Lincoln was, of course, the defense attorney on that trial. Or there was two trials. I'm not sure which one he's going to do. But so that in a nutshell. Oh, we're going to also have activities for the kids up in the courthouse in the afternoon. These activities, mostly they're going to be games, but also drawing. We're going to have the kids sketch on special paper. This paper turns, it's black paper. It's called magic scratch paper. And they're going to do cutouts of Abraham Lincoln's stovepipe hat and so forth. And, of course, cutouts of the heart. You know, Valentine's Day is coming up. So then, as you draw on the black paper, it changes color every time you draw, and no one knows what the color is going to be. It's special magic paper. So anyway, we've got all this lined up for the kids in the afternoon from 1 to 3:30. We'll also have a serving of Mary Todd's famous Kentucky almond cake, which she was famous on making even in the White House. She had the servants, cooks make it. We're going to serve that, and the server is going to be Mike Richner of Hilltop Catering, who's done research on the cake, because he's a fanatic about doing his recipes. And then we're going to have punch and cookies and so forth.
You know, go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I was going to say, we could go one of two ways. This Brian Fox Ellis, who will be doing this, the repertoire that he covers all over the United States is so interesting. Or we could go with Herndon, who was an interesting character in himself in the friendship and the law partnership, his relationship with Mary Todd, which wasn't very good. Going to write the autobiography of Lincoln and gathered all the things, lost all his money, couldn't put the thing together, and ended up in a partnership with another person.
I think, Jim, we ought to review the lineup at Viewpoint and have Judy and her daughter do this show.
Well, you're right,
she does
Cynthia.
such a great job.
William Herndon wasn't a favorite of Mary Todd, and perhaps that caused him to write unfavorably about her and her relationship with Abraham Lincoln, which was not true. For most extent. Even though Abraham Lincoln didn't help his wife around the house as much as maybe some of us modern men do, nevertheless, Abraham Lincoln respected Mary Todd very much, and I think he realized that Mary Todd first saw in Lincoln what he became, what he later became, and that was a politician, and of course later as President of the United States, which she didn't. I don't think she foresaw that, but I think her sights were like governor of Illinois, maybe. But that's one reason she dated Stephen Douglas. She was very excited about being a politician's wife and climbing the ladder and having servants like she was born with in Kentucky. But in Abraham Lincoln, is crusty and as poorly dressed as he was, she saw in him a brilliance which later the rest of us in the United States and of course our ancestors and have grown to know. But she saw this, she realized
Well,
this.
and as I read it, the autobiography ended up being 3 books. And there was a son who thought they were absolutely scathing, and a lot of the information he felt was not accurate.
Right, and that's true. A lot of it wasn't accurate, but then Herndon pushed himself off as interviewing all these friends of Lincoln, and he lived then, and so then there's a lot of credence given to his writings, but later have been proven not maybe all incorrect, but as improperly written. And it's because of his, I think a lot of it is due to his relationship with Mary Todd.
Well, that, and was there not also a little problem with alcoholism?
Right.
You know, and so you end up with a perception
Yeah.
and a memory that might not be as
Yeah.
sharp as...
That's true, Cynthia. I can see you've done some reading on this that is very good to this conversation. You need to have Paul Beaver in here. He would.
Paul is wonderful.
Yeah.
He's so knowledgeable.
Because I can't really say much more about all this, but Paul Beaver would really set you straight.
Well,
on
you
it.
taught math. I think you could have taught history just as well.
Well, you know what? I taught math because there was no room for a history teacher at my schools. All the history teachers were coaches. And since I wasn't much of a coach, I decided to go back and get my degree in math. And I got my master's in math as well. But I tell you something, I know a lot of smart coaches. I'm not saying the coaches weren't smart enough to teach math. As a matter of fact, some of them did teach math. But the coaches just spent more time doing their coaching and didn't have time grading math papers and learning how to be math teachers, so they taught history. But
slip your headset on. I think we have Mr. Ellis
Okay.
on the telephone here. Are we going to quit battling about this?
It's a good thing we like each other.
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Ellis. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. Pleasure to be here.
Nice to have you with us, sir. We have Phil Bertoni in the studio with us, and to my right is partner Cynthia Bowns. And I note, sir, in looking over the material that Mr. Bertoni gave us, that you seem to be a master of many characters, sir. I'm really impressed with the depth of the characters that you portray.
Well, at last count, it was about 20, but I play 4 different friends of Lincoln. It all began with Lincoln's childhood friend, which I performed for the sesquicentennial of Lincoln, Illinois, a town that he christened with a watermelon. And I played the childhood friend, but I kept getting deeper and deeper into the material and found that I had a couple hours of Lincoln the lawyer, Walt Whitman, whose best friend was at the assassination, and then a Civil War soldier from Peoria, Matthias Stritt, who, that shows more about the war, but there's, of course, a lot of great Lincoln stories in that show as well. So Lincoln makes it easy. He's a great storyteller.
Well, it seems to me that the breadth of the characters, for instance, you play Walt Whitman, for goodness sakes. You play John Audubon.
Yeah.
You have Edgar Allan Poe. Mark Twain. My goodness gracious.
How did you pick the people you have determined you want to portray? I mean, Gregor Mendel?
Well, it's a mix of... sometimes it's a commission, like Gregor Mendel and Charles Darwin, the Field Museum in Chicago, called me and said, we're putting together an exhibit. They'd seen me as John James Audubon and Meriwether Lewis. They said, rather than hire an actor, we'd like to have a storyteller portray these characters because they like the way that I, can improv and bring the character to life in a real dynamic way. But the character has to fit. I mentioned Meriwether Lewis. He was a psychotic botanist, and I like the botany part, but the psychosis is hard for me. So I
think that's a good thing.
Yeah, right. So there are some characters like Audubon, or the show I'm going to be doing at the elementary school on Friday in Mount Pulaski. Austin Gulliher is just a really fun and funny guy, and I feel real comfortable in his shoes. So, part of this, back to your question, picking, it has to be somebody I feel comfortable in their skin, and I'm not an actor per se, so I have to overlap with the character. So basically I get to be myself in that time period, in that, period clothing. But it's a character that there's a real simpatico. It's important.
You're a young fella. You're a very young man to be as portraying all the men that you do. How did you get started in this?
Well, when I was in high school, I was in every theater production that we did, and dabbled a little bit in community theater kind of things. And then in college, I invented my own major, the art of biology, approaching the life sciences from an aesthetic perspective. So my professors teased me, since I made up my own major, I had to make up my own career. And because of my background in science, I do play several scientific characters. But I'm also a published poet, and that's part of my attraction to Walt Whitman and Edgar Allan Poe and some of the literary characters.
Hi, Brian. This is Phil Bertoni.
Yes.
You might mention your campfire deals.
In what regard?
Well, I thought on your website you...
Yes. Yeah, I ran a summer camp on and off for 10 years. Yeah. And telling stories around the campfire is just what you do at camp. And so that's kind of where I feel like I did my time, 10 summers as a camp counselor, where I was on, almost every night around the campfire with the kids. So that's where I both, refined the talent that God gave me, as well as developed a lot of material, because when you have kids for 3 weeks, you can't tell the same story every night. So I had to really stretch and grow, and really began as a traditional folk tale teller, I'm part Cherokee and Irish, so I do a lot of traditional, fairy tales and folk tales and scary stories from around the world kind of things.
Well, and I would assume that as you're doing these characters for grade school children, they probably get a whole lot more out of it rather than reading a book. But watching you enact and kind of, in a sense, becoming whomever that person is.
I would agree 100%, because, as an author, I love libraries, I love books, that's where I get a lot of my material. But meaning is more than black ink on white paper. Making meaning from text is about facial expression and gesture and intonation and inflection and all the things that aren't in a book. And so part of my job is to bring that to life, to really make the words kind of sing and dance, is the way I like to talk about it. And kids really connect. But so do adults. Like the program I'm doing Saturday morning at Mount Pulaski Courthouse, I'll be portraying Billy Herndon, Lincoln's law partner. And I've done this show for schools, and kids love it, but I've also done this program for a room full of lawyers. And, you know, to get inside Lincoln's head as a lawyer and really think about how he tried a case and his courtroom shenanigans and the way it worked. You know, Lincoln won by far more cases than he lost, though he lost a few, like all good lawyers. And he had several really wonderful cases in Mount Pulaski. The tragedy is a lot of those court records burned in a fire in, I believe it was 1857. But thanks to Phil there, he's recovered some of the court documents from the cases that went on to the state Supreme Court and were appealed later, because then the court records were moved to Springfield.
And you know what, sir? I'm going to have to take just a quick break because my sponsors are appealing for some time here, and then we're going to come right back to Brian Ellis. If you'll just stand by for just a few minutes, sir.
No problem.
Thank you, sir.